Hear me well? Good. Um, Before I begin, I just have to thank Judy for stepping in and stepping up. So grateful. And Chris, I wish you a quick recovery and thorough recovery. It's your bread and butter, so take care of it. We both seem to have had a very exciting last week. Chris broke his thumb. My truck broke. It's not the same, Chris. It's not the same. But it is my bread and butter. And so my alternator died, and I called the dealership. They said they couldn't get it in till mid-next week. And it was so expensive, so I decided to fix it myself. Bad idea. Started Wednesday, finished yesterday. So I saw all 3 seasons in the meantime, or 4 seasons in the meantime. A friend of mine helped me. So now it's fixed. I'm very grateful. I know more about car repairs than I ever cared to know, and I'll never do it again. Thank you for the AV. I loved Pat's sharing. It sustains me as well, and I resonate with that. And it takes so many of us to make this service possible, and I'm grateful to every single one of you, Regina, all of you. So I would like to read some things. I have notes, unusual, right? I would like to read some things for you today, okay? This is from the Old Testament, the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to uproot. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to tear down, and a time to build. A time to weep, a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search, and a time to give up. A time to keep, and a time to throw away. A time to tear, and a time to mend. A time to be silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. I read this, and I read this so many times. Like, I'm sure you know about this, and I read it so many times. I'm a minister, and I was trained in a Christian seminary, so, I read this so many times, and I have to tell you, only yesterday did I notice that there's a time to love and a time to hate. It makes me feel better. Anyway, here's another one. This is the New Testament. Matthew 7, chapter 12. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. This is also known as the Golden Rule. Now I'm going to read something from the Tao. When the great Tao is forgotten, goodness and piety appear. When the body's intelligence declines, cleverness and knowledge step forth. When there is no peace in the family, filial piety begins. When the country falls into chaos, patriotism is born. Fame or integrity, which is more important? Money or happiness, which is more valuable? Success or failure, which is more destructive? If you look to others for fulfillment, you will never truly be fulfilled. If your happiness depends on money, you will never be happy with yourself. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. Now I'm going to read something from the Bhagavad Gita. It is better to live your own destiny imperfectly than to live an imitation of somebody else's life with perfection. Should I repeat this? I'm going to. It is better to live your own destiny imperfectly than to live an imitation of somebody else's life with perfection. That is as sure for that which is born as birth is for that which is dead. Therefore, grieve not for what is inevitable. One who abandons all desires and becomes free from longing and the feeling of I and my attains peace. One who abandons all desires and becomes free from longing and the feeling of I and my attains peace. The happiness which comes from long practice, which leads to the end of suffering, which at first is like poison, but at last like nectar, this kind of happiness arises from the serenity of one's own mind. And now I'm going to read just a general statement about Buddhism, because why not? Not to do any evil, to cultivate good, to purify one's heart. That is the teaching of all the Buddhas. You're probably wondering, why is she reading all these things? Because I can. No, that's a serious thing. There are many churches who are gathered right now in this country where you couldn't read this stuff. And if you did read it, you would have to put it down. You would have to somehow place it below the superior Christian teachings. Because that is the one only way to God. Here, I can read this. I can read this, and maybe not all of you resonate with it, but you're okay with that. Because you know that the person sitting on your left or on your right or behind you or in front of you, they may resonate, and you like that. You like that if this moment I am not being fed, but you are, I'm okay with that. Because when the next moment comes, I will be fed, and maybe you won't be, and then you will like that for me. Because here, we can speak freely. We can bring in different teachings, and here we have an open mind and an open heart to receive. And we're definitely willing to consider. Willing to consider that maybe my way is not the only way. Maybe my truth can be expanded. Maybe my truth can be modified or needs to be left behind. There is that openness. Here, I can also tell you about Stephen Fry, who said that if he were ever to meet God, and if he could ask a question, he would ask, "Infant cancer, how dare you? How dare you?" He also said that there is a worm in Africa whose entire lifespan is to borrow into children's eyes and eat their way out. How dare you? What kind of God would allow for that? If you are almighty, and if you're all good, how dare you create something like this? When you could have created all good, this is what you got down to? Here I can also tell you about Ricky Gervais, who said, look, he's a comedian, actor, comedian, screenplay writer. He said, look, if you took all the religious books away. You hid them, you burned them, all of them gone. Then you take all the science books away, all of them. Not one is left. Burn them, gone. In 1,000 years, the science books would be reconstructed the exact same way as the ones we just burned. Because there's the test, the empirical test. Because gravity is gravity. Because the laws of science are the laws of science. But what about those religious literature? How would that be reconstructed? Would that look anything like the ones we just got rid of? What do you think? So when you are so attached to your religious convictions, to your philosophy, consider that. Consider that. Here I can talk about that. And you will not end my contract. In fact, my guess is that you're thinking now, you're contemplating, you're considering. Here I can say that because we are free, because here we don't have to hang our intellect at the door, check it at the door. We can bring it in, engage it, feed it, grow it. Let it explore areas we never considered before. How amazing is that? That's this place. Now, why is this possible? Because our roots are in Christianity. We allowed this tree to grow. So that's our roots. And then this tree grew. And you know how you can, and I forget what that's called, when you, thank you. See how we know each other, we finish each other's thoughts. This graft, we grafted this tree. So the fruits are not what the roots would indicate. Because we've grafted. We've enriched this tree with life, with the possibility of, oh, so many things. So the fruits here are different. Here the fruits are everything. Because so is life. Is everything. Is Alpha and Omega. So the fruits are Alpha and Omega. All that there is. In fact, we said, we don't even want a dogma. We said, rather, we're going to formulate these principles. And then we will hold on to them for as long as they still stand true. And then even these principles are not carved in stone. In the light of new information, we'll change them. We will tweak them. We will do whatever it takes. Because our most important goal in life is to stay connected to life and love. That's it. So the teachings must reflect that and must support that. That's the circle of life in here. So I want to read to you a statement that on February 14th, 2024, this year, was developed by the Office of the President and Senior National Staff of the Unitarian Universalist Association. I want to read this to you because it is timely, and also you can read it yourself on the website, on the UUA website, but maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, then I'd like to share it with you here, okay? There are crystallizing moments in the course of history when, in spite of the differences that exist among us, our common reverence for life demands that we speak with moral courage and clarity on the side of love. As people of faith and conviction, Unitarian Universalists share a belief that every human life is sacred, endowed with worth and dignity from the moment of birth with no person deserving of freedom and flourishing, with no person more deserving of freedom and flourishing than any other. Our living tradition has long maintained that the only hells that exist are those that we create for one another here on earth. We are watching in real time as the people of Gaza exist in a human-made hell that grows more unimaginable every day. At this point, this is February 14, 28,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed and nearly 70,000 have been injured by Israeli attacks in Gaza since Hamas attacked Israeli citizens on October 7. The medical infrastructure in Gaza has been decimated, and the Israeli government continues to prevent humanitarian aid, including food and water, from reaching refugees. And this week, the Netanyahu administration has announced the forced evacuation and ground invasion of Rafah, where 1.3 million displaced Palestinians have set up a massive tent city as a last refuge. The UUA first joined the call for a ceasefire on October 17, rooted in our historic positions as an organization. Nearly 4 months later, this situation could not be more urgent. In their January 26 emergency interim ruling, the International Court of Justice found that these atrocities in Gaza plausibly constitute genocidal acts and issued an immediate order to the Israeli government to take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2, the United Nations Convention on Genocide. While the UUA has historically affirmed the importance of the genocide conventions, we know there is a wide range of opinion among Unitarian Universalists about how this terminology is used today. What should be clear to all of us, however, is that the Israeli government's forced displacement, punishment, and intentional inflicting of suffering and death upon children and civilians in Gaza is a moral catastrophe that our faith demands we condemn and resist. In that spirit, the Unitarian Universalist Association reiterates our condemnation of the Israeli military's ongoing violence against Gaza and joins again with the growing chorus of voices across the globe urging immediate and total ceasefire, the provision of massive emergency humanitarian aid, and the safe return of all hostages and prisoners. This terrifying moment calls all people of faith and conscience to do everything in our power to push our governments to interrupt genocide, address humanitarian crisis, avert multinational war, and weave just and lasting peace across the globe. As longtime proponents of the crucial work of the United Nations and its official agencies, the UUA is grateful for the nuance and thoroughness of the UN International Court of Justice's January 26 findings. We decry that Israeli leadership's ongoing rejection of all ceasefire proposals and outright flouting of the ICJ's findings and directives in its ongoing military assault. The UUA further condemns the US government's unabated complicity in the crisis in Gaza, from providing massive military aid to Israel to slashing funding to the United Nations Relief and Work Agency for Palestinian refugees. Without international pressure, the Netanyahu administration will undoubtedly follow through on their vow to achieve total victory by decimating the entirety of Gaza. We call for the US government to stop funding Israel's military machine and to leverage its unrivaled influence upon Israel and in the world community to intervene and stop the attacks on Gaza. Each day the assault on Gaza continues, brings us closer to the brink of calamitous international war. Tensions continue to escalate among nations, and violence has already transgressed national borders and international waters. As a faith community that has historically advocating for peaceful resolution of conflict and protection of international law, we believe it is imperative that the global community respond decisively to mitigate ongoing harm and prevent further catastrophic loss of life. This terrifying moment calls all people of faith and conscience to do everything in our power to push our governments to interrupt genocide, address humanitarian crisis, avert multinational war, and weave just and lasting peace across the globe. We call upon all Unitarian Universalists to open our hearts and be present to the depths of human suffering in this moment, not just by one group, but by people of many nationalities, identities, and religions. We commit to identifying and mitigating the evils of anti-Semitism, anti-Arabism, and Islamophobia in our own tradition, and to address their toxic legacy wherever we encounter them. Our faith rejects all forms of their toxic legacy wherever. Our faith rejects all forms of nationalism and supremacy and insists that we struggle for multiracial, multi-religious democracy in our own nation and across the world. We encourage all Unitarian Universalists to take action in solidarity, not only with global movements for ceasefire, but with liberatory, pro-democratic movements of all kinds that are working toward a future that contains the conditions of possibility for a true and enduring peace. Wow. I love that. I love that. Our roots led to this fruit. So, you're getting the picture, what I'm describing to you, who we are, and how we see ourselves in the world. There is freedom of thinking. There's a big heart here. There's tremendous love and a clarity and a desire and hunger for justice and equity. That's who Unitarian Universalists are. This is who we are here locally, and look where we are nationally. Look at the clarity of message and voice with which we address current situations in this world, terrific situations in this world. There's courage in these hearts of ours. There's clarity, there's wisdom. That's who we are. Those roots allowed for these fruits, here and then there. How could that have happened? How could that have happened when there's so many other voices in the world that speak otherwise, that discourage thinking, that are willing to put the God stamp on something, and once you do that, you no longer have to think. If God said so, I don't need to question it. In fact, that's a bad thing. Like Pat said, when her child asked questions, it wasn't welcome. In fact, it wasn't at all even addressed. It was so wrong that they wouldn't even address it. So we formulated some principles. And I'm going to read them too. We don't often read them in a service, all of them at once. But I'm going to read them. Initially we had 7. But we said they're not written in stone. And if we learn otherwise, if life shows us, we're willing to amend that. So this congregation then voted in the 8th principle. And now, Greater UU and all of us are also working on Article 2. This faith is still evolving, as it should. It should because our consciousness is evolving. It should because we constantly learn new information. If we learn new information, then our teaching must not be arrested in the past. They must keep up. Otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, what's the point? So the principles. First, we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Love it? Love it. Second, we believe in justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Why not? Third, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Yeah, regardless of what you believe, you're accepted here. Regardless of how you explore your spirituality, what path you choose to the mystical, or to that which you might call God or whatever. We honor that. That's yours. We encourage that. We embrace you. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Oh, yeah. And that's what Pat said. It's not just questions that are welcomed here, even doubts. You have doubts? Yeah, you can speak into them. You won't be shamed. You will be engaged. Somebody will explore your doubts and then see what's on the other end of it. There is that safe space here. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Yeah. We're a very democratic society. Sometimes it slows us down, it bogs us down. And you know that. But the good news is, though, when we do get somewhere, we go together as one. There's buy-in, because we honor each other's contribution to any issue, and that takes time. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Of course, of course. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. All of it. It's not just us. You know, we don't have that view that humans are above everything and every life form. Instead, we say we are just part of this web of life. Sure, we have a space, we have a role to play, but it is not to subdue the rest of the earth, to conquer it, to do as we wish with any other life form, abuse them. No, we honor all of life, all of it. The eighth principle which we adopted says, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. It all begins here. And of course, we believe in diversity. Believe in diversity? Well, we acknowledge diversity. What's there to believe in? It's there. It's there. It's not a matter of belief or disbelief. It's there. We just open our eyes and we say, yeah, it's there, and we honor it. You have a gay minister, that says a lot about you. We honor here everybody. We welcome everybody here, just as you are. Not all behaviors are welcome, but all people are welcome. That's huge. This is this community. Today is that Sunday when, you know, we do the big push before the pledge drive. This is when the minister usually gives a talk and encourages you to give, and that doesn't inspire me. You know, I'm really not here to somehow put in a word that then somehow makes you reach into your pocket and get your checkbook and write a lot of zeros after a high number, preferably. I don't like to do that. That's never why I became a minister. This is why I became a minister. And I don't think that you also come here to hear about that. This is why you come here. Because this is who we are. This is what we stand for. That when we show up in the world, this is how we show up. Because these values don't just live within these walls. We carry them wherever we go. Wherever we go. And it takes money. So there's that. So don't write those checks, by all means. The dinner is coming up. The pledges have been sent out. Definitely write those checks. But this is why. This is what makes it worth it. This is why I can stand in front of you and not blush for asking. Because it's worth it. Because it's noble. Because it's full of life. And because it's full of love. And it's full of clarity and wisdom and justice. So the UUA is working on Article 2. All of us are. We're talking about this. We're tweaking our principles even more. We're changing them because we realized something was missing. I mean, sure, it's there in every single principle. It's just not spelled out in so many words. And we said it's time. It's time we spell it out. So this is the proposed article. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values, love. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Love is in all the principles. It's not quite spelled out. And we thought it's time. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice. I feel good about that. For I am willing to live in love and do whatever it takes to see it spread, grow, heal, do the work of transformation, give life. So for that, I hope together we can truly, honestly say, thank you. Thank you.